My name is Payne, and I need to tell you about the day I discovered my parents were charging me $1,500 a month to live in my childhood bedroom, while my younger sister lived there completely free. I'm 28 years old, work as a marketing coordinator in downtown Phoenix, and until 6 months ago, I thought I was doing the right thing by helping my family. It was a sweltering Tuesday morning in July when everything unraveled. I was grabbing my usual coffee and bagel before work when I overheard Mom on the phone with her friend Dorothy. "Oh, Payne's been such a help," she was saying, stirring her tea at the kitchen counter. "She pays us $1,500 a month for her room, which really helps with the mortgage. And it's so nice having both girls home again." I almost choked on my coffee. Both girls? I stopped dead in my tracks, pretending to check my phone while I listened. "Well, Brooklyn's situation is different, of course," Mom continued, lowering her voice slightly. "She's still figuring things out after dropping out of college, so we're not charging her anything right now. But Payne has that good corporate job, so she can afford to contribute." My hands started shaking. For 8 months, I'd been paying what I thought was my fair share of household expenses. Mom had sat me down when I moved back after my apartment lease ended and explained that with the economy being tough, they needed help with the mortgage. She said it would be temporary, just until I saved enough for my own place again. But Brooklyn, my 24-year-old sister, had been living here for over a year without paying a dime. Brooklyn, who quit her job at Target 3 months ago because her manager was too demanding. Brooklyn, who orders DoorDash almost every night and leaves the dishes for me to clean. Brooklyn, who's been figuring herself out since she dropped out of Arizona State 2 years ago. I stood there in that kitchen, listening to my mother justify why I should subsidize my sister's lifestyle, and something inside me snapped. All those times Mom had made comments about how I needed to step up and help the family. All those guilt trips about being the responsible daughter. All those conversations about family loyalty and sticking together through tough times. Meanwhile, Brooklyn was getting a free ride while I was working 50-hour weeks and handing over a third of my salary to live in a room with my high school soccer trophies still on the shelves. After Mom hung up, I confronted her directly. "Mom, why am I paying rent while Brooklyn lives here for free?" She looked genuinely surprised that I'd overheard. "Oh honey, that's different. Brooklyn's still finding her path. You have a stable career. So because I'm responsible, I get punished?" "It's not punishment, it's contribution. This is what families do." She turned back to loading the dishwasher, dismissing me like I was 12 years old again. That's when I knew exactly what I had to do. I spent the rest of that day at work researching housing markets and mortgage rates instead of working on the Henderson Industries campaign. By lunch, I had a pretty clear picture of what I could afford, and it was eye-opening. For 8 months, I'd been paying my parents $1,500 in rent plus splitting utilities, which came to about $1,700 total. I'd also been buying most of my own food and contributing to household supplies. All told, I was spending nearly $2,000 a month to live in my childhood bedroom, while my sister contributed exactly nothing. But here's the kicker: with my salary and the savings I'd built up, I could actually afford a mortgage payment on a decent house. I'd been so focused on helping my family that I'd never really crunched the numbers on my own place. That evening, I drove around some neighborhoods I liked. Tempe had some cute starter homes, and Chandler had newer developments that weren't too far from work. By the time I got home, I had appointments scheduled with 3 different realtors for the weekend. When I walked into the house, Brooklyn was sprawled across the couch watching Netflix, surrounded by empty takeout containers. Mom was in the kitchen making dinner. "Payne, perfect timing," Mom called out. "Can you grab some groceries tomorrow? We're out of milk and bread, and I didn't have time today." It was always we when it came to expenses, but somehow Brooklyn never seemed to be included in the grocery runs or utility payments. I nodded and went upstairs to my room, where I spent the evening on Zillow, dreaming of having my own space again. The first house showing was Saturday morning. It was a 3-bedroom ranch in Tempe with a small backyard and updated kitchen. The realtor, Amanda, was enthusiastic and knowledgeable. "With your income and credit score," she told me, "you could definitely qualify for something in this price range. Are you pre-approved yet?" "Not yet, but I can get that started this week." "Great. You know, the market's been competitive, but if you're serious and can move quickly, there are definitely opportunities out there." Walking through that house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: excitement about my future. My own space, my own rules, no more subsidizing anyone else's lifestyle. The second house was even better, a 2-bedroom townhouse with a tiny garden and a garage. It was at the very top of my budget, but doable. The third house was perfect, a small 2-bedroom bungalow with original hardwood floors and a renovated kitchen, priced right in my sweet spot. By Sunday afternoon, I had my heart set on the bungalow. Amanda had run some preliminary numbers, and my monthly payment would be less than what I was currently paying my parents. Less money for a better situation. It was almost too good to be true. Monday morning, I called the mortgage broker Amanda had recommended. "How quickly can we get this process started?" I asked. "Well, if you've got all your paperwork ready, we could have you pre-approved by Wednesday." "How soon are you looking to buy?" "As soon as possible." That afternoon, I submitted my pre-approval application. 2 days later, I was officially qualified to buy a house. The bungalow was still available, and the seller was motivated to close quickly. I hadn't told my family anything yet. Getting pre-approved for my mortgage was easier than I'd expected. My credit score was solid, I had steady income, and I'd managed to save more than I realized while living at home, mostly because I'd been too busy working to spend money on much else. The bungalow I wanted was listed at $285,000, which was perfect for my budget. It had been on the market for 30 days, and the seller was open to negotiation. Amanda thought we could get it for $275,000, maybe less. But I had a better idea. While reviewing my savings and investment accounts, I realized I had enough to buy the house outright. Not just the down payment, the entire purchase price. Between my 401k loan option, my regular savings, and some stocks I'd inherited from my grandmother, I could pay cash. "Are you sure you want to do that?" Amanda asked when I told her my plan. "You'll lose out on the mortgage interest tax deduction, and you'll tie up a lot of liquidity." "I'm sure," I said. "How much faster can we close if I'm paying cash?" "Oh, significantly faster. We could probably close in 2 weeks instead of 30 to 45 days. Sellers love cash offers." "Perfect." I wanted to be moved out before my parents realized what was happening. The hardest part was keeping quiet at home. Every evening, Brooklyn would monopolize the TV while Mom cooked dinner that I'd help pay for but rarely got to choose. Every morning, I'd wake up to Brooklyn's dirty dishes in the sink and her wet towels on the bathroom floor. But now, instead of getting frustrated, I'd think about my future kitchen, my future bathroom, my future living room where I could watch whatever I wanted without asking permission. The inspection went smoothly. The appraisal came back right where we expected. By Friday, I was signing paperwork to buy my first house, and my family had no idea. I did tell my best friend Chloe, who was ecstatic. "It's about time," she said over lunch that Saturday. "I've been watching you bankroll your sister's lifestyle for months. It's insane." "I keep wondering if I'm being too harsh," I admitted. "Payne, you're 28 years old with a college degree and a good job. Brooklyn is 24 with no degree, no job, and no ambition. Your parents are charging you rent to subsidize her lifestyle. How is that fair?" She was right, of course. But part of me still felt guilty about the secret. These were my parents, after all. Shouldn't I talk to them first? Then I came home Sunday night to find Brooklyn had used the last of my expensive face wash and left the empty container on the bathroom counter. Mom was in the kitchen, and I could hear her on the phone with Dad, who was working late again. "Well, if Brooklyn needs a car, maybe we can help with the down payment," Mom was saying. "We've got that extra money from Payne's rent this month." My rent money was going toward a car for Brooklyn. I went upstairs and texted Amanda, "Let's schedule the closing as soon as possible." We closed the following Friday. By the time I walked out of the title company, I owned a house. My house. I had the keys in my hand and a deed with my name on it. I'd never felt so empowered in my life. I scheduled a moving truck for Saturday morning and took the day off work. The plan was simple: get all my stuff moved while everyone was out of the house, leave a note explaining the situation, and start my new life. Brooklyn had mentioned she was spending the weekend at her friend Amber's place, and my parents had their monthly trip to Costco and lunch afterward, which usually took most of Saturday. Perfect timing. The movers arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. I'd been packing secretly for 2 weeks, keeping boxes in my closet and under my bed. It didn't take long. After all, most of the furniture in my room belonged to my parents. I was mainly taking clothes, personal items, and the few pieces I'd bought myself over the years. By 10 a.m., my childhood bedroom was empty except for the built-in desk and the soccer trophies I decided to leave behind. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the room where I'd spent my teenage years and the last 8 months of my adult life. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. The hardest part was writing the note. I must have started it 10 different ways before settling on something simple. Mom and Dad, I've bought a house and moved out. I'll call you later to explain. Thank you for letting me stay here while I figured things out. Pain. I left it on the kitchen counter, right where Mom always put the mail. Then I locked the door behind me and drove to my new house. Walking into my empty bungalow for the first time as the owner was surreal. The afternoon sunlight was streaming through the living room windows, highlighting the beautiful hardwood floors. The kitchen was small but efficient, with white cabinets and granite countertops. The backyard was tiny but private, perfect for morning coffee. This was mine. All mine. I spent the afternoon directing the movers and unpacking essentials. By evening, I had a functional bedroom, a working kitchen, and a living room with my couch and TV. It wasn't fully decorated yet, but it was home. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon, but I'd been ignoring it. Finally, around 6 p.m., I checked my messages. 15 missed calls from Mom. 8 from Dad. 3 from Brooklyn, which was surprising since she usually couldn't be bothered to communicate with me unless she needed something. The voicemails ranged from confused to concerned to angry. Mom's first message, "Honey, we came home and your room is empty. Are you okay? Call us." Her last message, left around 4 p.m., "Pain, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear without talking to us. We're a family. Call me back right now." Dad's messages were shorter but more direct, "What the hell is going on? And you better have a good explanation for this." Brooklyn's messages were the most interesting. Did you really just move out without telling anyone? That's kind of dramatic, don't you think? I decided to let them stew for a while longer. I ordered Chinese food from a place near my new house, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, and sat in my backyard eating lo mein and watching the sunset. It was the most peaceful meal I'd had in months. By Sunday morning, I had 23 missed calls and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. I decided it was time to face the music. I called Mom first, figuring she'd be the most reasonable. "Pain. Oh my God, we've been so worried. Where are you? What happened?" "I'm fine, Mom. I bought a house and moved out." There was a long pause. "You what?" "I bought a house. I'm no longer living at home." But you didn't say anything. We had no idea you were even looking." "That's because I wanted to make the decision without pressure or guilt trips." Another pause. Then, "Guilt trips? Honey, what are you talking about? We've been nothing but supportive." "Mom, you've been charging me $1,500 a month while Brooklyn lives there free. How is that supportive?" "That's completely different. Brooklyn's situation." "Is what, exactly?" "She's 4 years younger than me, she's an adult, she has no job, and no responsibilities. Why shouldn't she contribute?" "She's still figuring things out." "For over a year? At what point does figuring things out become taking advantage of everyone else?" Mom's voice got that edge it always got when she felt defensive. "You know what, Pain? This is exactly the kind of selfish attitude I'd expect from you. Your sister is going through a difficult time, and instead of being supportive, you just abandon the family." "I didn't abandon anyone. I moved out like a normal adult. Without even discussing it with us. We're your parents. And I'm 28 years old with my own career and my own money. I don't need permission to live my own life." The conversation went downhill from there. Mom accused me of being ungrateful and selfish. I accused her of playing favorites and taking advantage of me. We both said things we probably shouldn't have. I hung up feeling drained but also validated. This reaction proved I'd made the right choice. Dad called an hour later. His approach was different, more disappointed than angry. "Pain, I just don't understand why you felt you had to sneak around like this. If you wanted to move out, you could have just talked to us." Would you have supported the decision? Well, we would have discussed it as a family. Exactly. You would have guilt-tripped me into staying and continuing to subsidize Brooklyn's lifestyle. That's not what we're doing. Dad, be honest with me. When was the last time Brooklyn contributed anything to the household? When was the last time she bought groceries or paid for utilities or helped with any expenses? He was quiet for a long moment. Her situation is different. How? She's still trying to figure out her career path. At 24? While living rent-free and having all her expenses covered by her older sister. You make it sound like we're being unfair to you. Aren't you? Another long pause. Payne, we raised you to be responsible and independent. Brooklyn needs more guidance. Brooklyn needs consequences and accountability. Instead, she's learned that she can do whatever she wants while other people pay for it. The conversation with Dad was less heated than the one with Mom, but ultimately just as frustrating. He couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge that the arrangement had been unfair to me. Brooklyn called last, and her approach was pure manipulation. Payne, I can't believe you just left like that. I thought we were close. We are close, Brooklyn, but that doesn't mean I have to subsidize your lifestyle. Subsidize? That's a harsh way to put it. Is it? I've been paying $1,500 a month plus utilities and groceries while you pay nothing. How would you describe that? I help out in other ways. Like what? I help Mom with stuff around the house. Like loading the dishwasher once a week? That's not fair. You know what's not fair? Working 50 hours a week so your little sister can order DoorDash every night and leave the containers for me to clean up. She started crying then, which was her usual tactic when logic wasn't working. I can't believe you're being so mean. This is going to devastate Mom and Dad. They're already talking about having to get a second mortgage because they won't have your rent money. That last part caught my attention. What do you mean, a second mortgage? They've been using your rent money to make their regular mortgage payments. Without it, they can't afford the house. Now things were making more sense. My parents weren't just charging me rent for extra income, they were depending on it to keep their house. Which meant they'd been living beyond their means and using me to make up the difference. I felt like I'd been played. The revelation that my parents had been using my rent money to make their mortgage payments changed everything. This wasn't just about fairness anymore, it was about financial manipulation. I spent Monday morning doing research. Property records showed that my parents had refinanced their house 2 years ago, taking out a significantly larger mortgage than they'd had before. They'd pulled out equity to pay for Brooklyn's college expenses and some home renovations, but now their monthly payment was nearly $3,000, way more than Dad's salary as a middle school teacher could cover. My $1,500 rent payment wasn't helping with expenses, it was keeping them from foreclosure. And they'd never told me. When I called Mom back that evening, I was ready for a different kind of conversation. Mom, Brooklyn told me you've been using my rent money to make your mortgage payments. There was a long silence. Well, yes, it helps with the household expenses. No, Mom. Brooklyn specifically said you can't afford the house without my rent money. That's not helping with expenses, that's depending on me to keep you from losing your home. Well, that's not exactly how I'd put it. How would you put it? Another pause. Your contribution helps us maintain our standard of living. The standard of living you can't actually afford. Payne, that's not fair. Your father and I worked hard to provide for this family. This house is our investment, our retirement plan. And you've been risking it by taking on more debt than you can handle. We thought you'd be living here longer. We thought we could count on your help. For how long? Were you planning to tell me I could never move out because you need my money? Of course not. We just thought. You thought you could manipulate me into staying by making me feel guilty about leaving. That's not what we were doing. But it was exactly what they were doing, and we both knew it. The next few weeks were tense. My parents called regularly, alternating between guilt trips and anger. Brooklyn seemed to think the whole situation would blow over if she just waited long enough. But the math didn't lie. Without my rent payments, my parents were facing serious financial trouble. Mom picked up extra tutoring hours, and Dad started driving for Uber on weekends, but it wasn't enough. 3 weeks after I moved out, Mom called in tears. "Payne, we need to talk. We're going to lose the house." "What do you mean?" "We missed last month's mortgage payment, and we can't make this month's either. The bank is starting foreclosure proceedings." I felt a mix of sympathy and frustration. "Mom, this is exactly why I couldn't stay. You built your financial plan around my money without asking me if I was okay with that. We never meant for it to go this far." "What's going to happen?" "We're going to have to sell. The realtor thinks we can get enough to pay off the mortgage and maybe have a little left over, but we'll need to find somewhere else to live." "What about Brooklyn?" "She'll have to find somewhere else to go too. We can't afford to support her anymore." For the first time since I'd moved out, Brooklyn was going to face real consequences for her choices. Part of me felt bad for my parents. They were good people who'd made poor financial decisions, and now they were losing their home. But another part of me felt vindicated. This situation proved that I'd been right to leave. They'd been living unsustainably, and my rent money had just been delaying the inevitable. The house sold within 6 weeks. My parents found a small 2-bedroom apartment in a less expensive part of town. Brooklyn, faced with the prospect of actually paying rent somewhere, suddenly found motivation to get a job at a local bank. It was the kick in the pants she'd needed all along. 6 months after moving into my bungalow, my life had completely transformed. I'd painted the walls in colors I actually liked, bought furniture that fit my style, and created a space that truly felt like home. The best part was the peace. No more walking on eggshells around family drama. No more feeling guilty for spending money on myself. No more cleaning up after someone else or sharing a bathroom with a slob. I'd also started dating again, something I hadn't had the energy for while dealing with constant family stress. His name was Derek, and he was a software engineer I'd met through Chloe. When he came over for dinner, I didn't have to explain why my little sister was sprawled on the couch in her pajamas at 7 p.m. or apologize for my mom asking him invasive questions about his career prospects. My relationship with my parents was slowly improving, though it would never be the same. Once they adjusted to their new living situation and Mom stopped working extra shifts, we started having lunch occasionally. They'd never fully admitted that their financial plan had been unfair to me, but they seemed to understand why I'd left. Brooklyn was the biggest surprise. Having to get a job and pay her own rent had been a wake-up call. She'd enrolled in community college to finish her degree and was actually making an effort to be responsible. When we met for coffee last month, she apologized for taking advantage of my generosity. "I didn't realize how much pressure I was putting on you," she said. "I just figured you could handle it because you were always so together." I was handling it, but it wasn't fair to ask me to. I know that now. And I'm sorry it took losing the house for me to figure it out. The financial impact of buying my house outright had been worth every penny. My monthly expenses were a fraction of what I'd been paying to live at home. I'd started maxing out my retirement contributions and building an emergency fund. For the first time in my adult life, I was financially secure. I'd also joined a hiking group and started taking pottery classes, things I'd never had time or energy for when I was constantly stressed about family drama and money. My favorite part of my new life was Saturday mornings. I'd wake up naturally, make coffee in my own kitchen, and sit in my backyard with a book. No one asking me to run errands or help with problems or contribute to expenses that weren't really my responsibility. Just peace. Last weekend, I hosted a housewarming party. Friends, co-workers, and neighbors filled my little bungalow with laughter and conversation. Derek helped me grill burgers in the backyard, and Chloe brought a beautiful succulent arrangement for my dining room table. As I looked around at all the people who'd come to celebrate my new home, I realized something important. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Supportive, reciprocal relationships where everyone contributed and everyone benefited. My parents and Brooklyn weren't terrible people, they were just stuck in unhealthy patterns that had taken a crisis to break. But I'd learned that I couldn't sacrifice my own well-being to enable their dysfunction. Setting boundaries had been the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it had also been the most important. These days, when people ask me about buying my first house, I tell them it was the best investment I ever made, not just financially, but emotionally. I'd bought more than a house, I'd bought my independence, my peace of mind and my self-respect. And that was worth far more than any amount of money.